You're on The Fake Fasters with Dan, Aisha and myself, Flick. And today in the studio, we're going to be talking about some of the efforts in the design and construction industry to move towards a net zero carbon emissions by 2030, which is 20 years ahead of the Paris Agreement. So we have Robert Goodliffe joining us in the studio. Robert is managing partner at ClarkeHopkinsClarke Architects, which is an architectural practice that has a strong focus on social impact and sustainability. ClarkeHopkinsClarke is a member of B Corp, Architects Declare Australia, Architects Without Frontiers and the Design Futures Council. So Robert, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
What actually is B Corp and what's the significance of this pact?
Well, we're one of as a certified B Corp, we're one of a global movement of now 3,000 purpose-driven businesses from 70 countries in about 150 industries, and who are choosing to use business as a force for good by balancing people and profit, by considering the workers that work for you, the society that you trade in, and the environment that you inhabit, alongside profit as contributors towards what your purpose is. So it's similar to fair trade certification for coffee. Mm-hmm. So B Corps sign a declaration of independence committing to be the change we seek in the world, to conduct business as if people and place mattered, that their products, practices and profits should aspire to do no harm and benefit all, and they have the understanding that we are each dependent on each other and thus responsible for each other and future generations. So it's a very comprehensive analysis that you need to make of your operations and your beliefs, working towards a minimum score of 80 points out of a possible 200. You can't lose points, you can only gain points by improving your impact. So we've been a B Corp for 3 years, and we're just this very week starting our recertification, which is required every 3 years. So we're far from perfect as an organisation. Most businesses can find improvement, and the B Corp certification process requires us to improve our impact every time we recertify. So it drives us towards improved benefits.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
What are some of these changes? Like, what are some of the specific changes you're making to the design and construction industry?
Well, fortunately, many of the decisions that we'd made since we founded our practice 60 years ago, and particularly in the last 30 years, were such that we didn't need to change very much to be a B Corp, to become B Corp certified with 92 points. So, many people find that they need to consider diversity in their business decision making, certainly transparency about their operations and with their staff, decisions about the way that they approach their relationship to clients and particularly the community. As community architects that do everything from schools, shopping centres, hospitals, aged care, childcare, we build communities, and much of our work is in the outer growth suburbs, and the impact that we're making particularly is the creation of dense walkable urban communities, walkable urbanism. Yeah. And we think that we can impact by impacting at a community level, we can make a greater impact than one house at a time or one office building at a time. Mm-hmm. And certainly impact is required at an increasing rate in these alarming times.
Yeah, and I suppose like the construction industry, more generally, is sometimes seen as kind of a bit of a dirty business. But what are some of the simple things that you could change to make for cleaner outcomes in the industry?
Yeah, well, certainly the construction industry accounts for about 40% of the global carbon dioxide emissions. So it is an intensively emitting industry. That's to the materiality, the energy required to construct buildings, and the process of construction, really. a lot of the decisions that you make in the design and orientation of buildings from first principles that architects have always done, certainly since the 50s, to orientate your buildings correctly, to provide necessary shading, and to consider passive ESD or environmentally sustainable design decisions is something that architects learn at uni and practice very well. It's not something that you see happening around the streets very much. But it's certainly something that architects are renowned for, that approach. But that can only take you so far. There's certain techniques that are still at boutique stage, such as prefabrication or modular construction, that reduces waste and reduces energy of construction. But they're still boutique and they're still largely manufactured offshore, so they come with a huge embodied energy to get them here. And in many ways, that's just shifting your carbon footprint to another country. It's not helping the world. But the biggest issue, as I see it, is concrete. And component of concrete is cement. And to create cement from lime, you have to heat up lime using generally still fossil fuel. And the chemical process to create cement releases CO2. So it's been said that this next the century between 1950 and 2050 will be known in the history of mankind as the century of urbanisation, and it's expected that between now 2020 and 2030 the world will be urbanising at the rate of one Sydney every 6 weeks.
Wow.
And most of those will be housed in concrete apartment buildings. Even when we look to re-stimulate the Australian economy, we're going to be doing it by building dams, tunnels, roads and infrastructure, all of which is concrete.
Are there sort of emerging alternatives to traditional concretes? It's such a long-standing building material. Has anyone come up with something that's good?
Just some. There are alternative cements. One of which uses manganese or a material that contains manganese, and the actual chemical process in producing that cementitious material actually absorbs carbon. So we've got to find materials that sequester carbon, and there is a big push towards cross-laminated timber, using timber construction, and the engineering and fire ratings for buildings and apartment buildings and offices up to 20 stories is proven and accepted. But of course that's one building at a time, and much of that manufacture is again not available in Australia, so it relies on the commercialisation of these ideas. But speaking with Dave Ritter, who's the CEO of Greenpeace Australia Pacific, the thing that gets him out of bed every morning, working in this sphere day in, day out, and allows him to sort of actually wake up and get out of bed and not just remain in a fetal position, is that all the technology that we need to remain below 1.5 degrees at the turn of the century is known. We've got everything we know. We just don't have the political will and the social will to make it happen at the pace necessary.
And I was wondering, there must be, further to that, there must be a lot of challenges that you face in going carbon neutral and convincing clients and I suppose real estate developers to invest in carbon neutral buildings and plans. What's been your experience with that?
I think that was the driver for the group of architects in Melbourne initially, and some in Sydney to make the statement, architects declare a climate and biodiversity emergency. Came off the back of a similar declaration from British architects toward the end of last year, and around the same time as the School Kids for Climate strike.
Yeah.
So architects were widely represented. They had probably some of the most creative, certainly the most graphically perfect banners at the strike, and a huge amount of signatories to that declaration. Of course, it sat there for 3 months, and then a smaller group, again around Brunswick, said, well, what does declaring a climate strike actually mean? And around the start of the bushfires, there was a decision that Architects Act is necessary, some action. So that was promoted on social media, and hundreds of architects have now signed up to become carbon neutral by 2020.
If you cast yourself forward 20 or 30 years and we'd been successful in this mission to sort of decarbonise the building industry, what would the new built landscape look like? What would be some of the features that are different then that you see now?
I think the secret to people feeling comfortable is that it doesn't look any different. The materiality choices can just be different choices within the same sort of staple. It doesn't need to all of a sudden start looking like
little domes and things.
I don't think. I think people are still conservative in terms of what they want to live in and what they want to work in. But there are incredible exemplar projects around the world. And I think it's just a matter of educating yourself of what the possibilities are, because the world's full of experimenters, and as I said, the solutions are tried and tested, albeit at a boutique level.
So what are some steps that listeners can take, either as individuals or businesses, or if you're part of a community organisation, what can we do?
Well, certainly I'd promote people looking for B Corps and supporting B corporations, because the certification means, in this era of greenwashing and fake news and virtue signalling, that an independent certification of best practice in business can be trusted. We certainly trust each other as B Corps. I would encourage all businesses to take the B Corp assessment of their own operations, even if they don't choose to become certified, but at least test themselves against best practice. I think having gone through the process of assessment of our own, as a business, our own carbon account, we found that a lot of the decisions that we made when we developed our office 12 years ago, and the decisions we've made as an organisation increasingly over the last decade, has meant that our carbon account is 35% of the benchmark for a similar sized professional practice firm. So, of course, mitigation of how much carbon you generate is the first impact. So everyone should, I think, get onto the carbon neutral website. Google it, do your research, and do an assessment of what your house or business carbon footprint is. You may choose not to then offset your remaining footprint, but at least you're armed with the knowledge, and knowledge is power.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent advice there. If you've just tuned in, we've been speaking with Robert Goodliffe from ClarkeHopkinsClarke Architects about some of the efforts made in the design and construction industry to move towards net zero carbon emissions by 2030. Thank you so much, Robert, for coming in.
My pleasure.
And I hope that's given you plenty to think about.